Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea, product marketer here at Dreamdata, and welcome back to Attributed, a podcast hosted by Dreamdata. You can find this and other episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Today, we're diving into how B2B teams can create content that actually moves the needle. And to help us do that, I am joined by Amanda Natividad, VP of Marketing at SparkToro. So thank you so much, Amanda, for being here. And I thought you might as well introduce yourself and SparkToro because I think you'll do it better than me.
Thank you for having me, Andrea. So I'm Amanda Natividad. I am the VP of Marketing at SparkToro, the audience research startup. So at SparkToro, we have, we make software that helps people learn more about their audiences. And so when I say that, what I really mean is we help you figure out, what your audience is searching for online, what podcasts they listen to, which social networks they use so that to be on those social networks too. We help you do all these things so that you can do better marketing, right? So you can create content that resonates better so that you can go to the platforms where people actually hang out and really make an impact in all the ways that any other kind of traditional keyword research or surveys or even customer interviews can't really tell you.
Yeah. So today's theme is content 201. And I guess my first question is what separates 201 level content from the 101 that most teams, I guess, are still familiar with and still doing?
Yeah, I love this question because I've been talking about Content 201 for a while, but no one's ever actually asked me that, like what separates the two. So, okay, so Content 101, I'm thinking that is you don't have a content channel set up yet, right? Maybe you're new to the team or the company is new to content. So this might be when you are setting up the blog, right? Debating whether it's a subdirectory or subdomain, all that good stuff. Maybe you produce the first ever white paper. That to me is 101, right? It's building the foundation for the rest of the content. Content 201 is what comes next. So it's like you already have the blog. Maybe you've had a blog for a couple years. Maybe you started the email newsletter 6 months ago and you're wondering what to do next. Like, what's the next channel or the next arbitrage opportunity? How do I get more from my content? Are there other content formats entirely that I should be considering? Right? Like maybe we have the blog, we got a great, demand generation wheel flying, right? We have all the white papers and stuff. Maybe now we need a podcast, right? So Content 201 helps you figure out what those opportunities are and how to do them in a way that resonates with your audience.
So, as you said before with SparkToro, yeah, you help your customers figure out like where are their audiences hanging out, I guess is how I would describe it. And you just mentioned now like that 201 piece is like, okay, what is our next step? Maybe it's still in the blog, but maybe like a different way of writing content, or maybe we need a new channel like the podcast. How would someone that doesn't know where their audience is hanging out, how would they figure out where the next channel is, I guess?
Yeah, so that's where I would say, for for worry I have of like being too self-promotional, that's where I would say SparkToro could come in, right? So I'll explain this in two ways. One using SparkToro, one without. So with SparkToro, you could search for if you get a decent amount of website traffic, you can search your own website so that you can see, okay, people who come to my website, what are the other things they're doing online? Right? That's pretty straightforward. But maybe you're a new brand and you don't have website traffic yet. Like you don't have measurable traffic. You could also search based on how your audience self-describes online. So maybe you're in a B2B market, you're selling to product managers. You can search in SparkToro for product managers. And finally, you can also search by search keyword. So based on the keywords that your audience is Googling, which helps if you are doing something more pain point oriented. So maybe you are a skincare company, right? You could search for maybe not just skincare, but maybe you can search for like, you can run an audience search based on the people who are searching for ways to brighten and smooth out their skin. Right? That's a very specific skincare
Yeah.
concern. Right? So you can do that. Then Sparktorial will show you like, hey, this audience is more likely to use LinkedIn compared to the average internet user. Okay, here are some other popular websites that this audience frequents. So maybe now you can consider them for co-marketing opportunities. That's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it is, I would say, by guessing and testing. Right? I think it's you could call up a couple of your customers if you can, right? Ask them a bunch of questions like, "Hey, what social networks do you use? What social accounts do you follow?" But one, that takes a lot of time, right? Not everyone has a direct line to customers. And other thing is, as much as I do think it's very important to talk to your customers, it's also expensive too. If you're a customer, you don't or a potential customer and some company reaches out to you and says, "Hey, can I just talk to you for 15 minutes?" You don't wanna do that. Like, why? You might even be like, "Okay, what are you gonna give me? Like, are you gonna pay me for my time?" Which is fair, right? Which is why I say it's expensive to ask for that. And that's why I say, like, I would say guess and test. So if you think your audience might be on LinkedIn more than the average,
Yeah.
like, for their pain points, then yeah, you can like go on LinkedIn, look up maybe some job titles to find some people with that job title, and you can kind of create a sort of proxy list of people who post online to follow and kind of see their pain points. I think that's a good way to go about B2B, just because I think it is a safe guess to say, I think my customer, in the B2B space is probably on LinkedIn. I think that's a fair guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I really like this whole idea of like guess and test, especially if, like, for example, if a podcast is not going to be like this massive undertaking, if it's like a microphone in a meeting room, just try it out, see if it lands. And if it doesn't, like, you know, no harm, no foul. It wasn't
Yeah.
the biggest investment. I think definitely I'm a big fan of whatever you do, whether it's content or not, like experimentation does bring about a lot of cool stuff and it's fun. I know that you also a part of this content 201 philosophy that, you very much champion. You also talk about or maybe challenge a little bit this idea of like doing more, like publishing more, shipping more, mentality. And what do you think, like when we look at B2B teams specifically, what do you think they still misunderstand about what quality content actually means?
Yeah. This is a tough question because there is no universal standard for what quality means, right? It's subjective. I can say that, you know, I can say that, "Oh, I still think SNL, Saturday Night Live is funny." I might say that. I think it's great. I think it's funny. I still like to watch it every week. Someone else might say, "No, this is a terrible show. Hasn't been good since the 90s."
Yeah.
Right? Those are two different different opinions on quality. That's not helpful. What I think is more helpful is to find that sort of balance between trying to develop taste. I know that's really hard to say because that is so subjective,
Yeah.
and I think the best way to hone a sense of taste is to consume the content that you think is high quality. So, maybe start with that subjectivity. Like, I love, like, the one podcast I really love, it's not a work one, but it's called the Sold a Story podcast, and it is about this kind of the science of reading and how children learn to read.
Oh,
It's
cool.
it's my favorite podcast right now, but that to me is a high quality podcast. So if I think about, okay, if I wanna create a really good podcast, that might be something I would anchor to. And so a lot of what they do a lot of really deep research. It's basically an investigative journalistic
Those are
podcast.
my favorite, I have to say
Right?
as
They're
well.
so good, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that is very different, right? It doesn't mean that if you don't do a podcast like that, it's not good quality. No, it doesn't mean that. It's just that that is one form of good quality content. So I would say find those things that you think are produced really well, figure out what you admire about it, and see what you can emulate in a way that is sustainable for you. So that's subjective, and that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is anchor it to a business need. So if you think about content, and I talk about this a lot as like if you think of content as a service, you think of how content can perform a service for your company, right? So like every asset, it serves a job, right? It serves a client, and then there's a purpose, or you measure it with a metric, right? So every piece of content you create has a job to do. And if you think about it like that, that will help you get to quality. Because if you're thinking about like, okay, I am going to create this case study. I'm going to do this deep dive with this customer. I'm going to make do this case study so that I can help the sales team close more deals. Like that's a specific goal, and that gives you enough objectivity where you could probably get to a decent sense of quality, right? Where the things like how it's designed, whether you did a PDF or a microsite, like those things matter a little bit less in terms of the quality, right? Because at the end of the day, your sales team might say, I don't care what it looks like. Just get me the details. Like, get me these 3 bullet points that help me close the deal.
Yeah,
You
I
can
need the
put it
numbers.
right. They're like, put it in a Google Doc. I don't care. Right. So like that's a good example of like kind of high quality, but also very subjective.
When you talk about treating content as like content as a service,
Mhm.
I really like that you brought up, for example, a success story for sales, because that's such a specific example. And also, what I like about looking at it as like that there's a client and that there's a job is that it also gives the content piece, again, regardless of format, we're getting to that later, but it gives the content piece like KPIs automatically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just gives you a guiding light so quickly that you know, like, the purpose and you know what metrics it's being judged on. So now and I think that always that can even inform it down to format, right? But I guess back to the experimentation, when we look at this content as a service, how do you decide which assets deserve maybe like a deeper investment, kind of like that investigative journalism podcast that we were talking about? And which one should maybe stay a little bit it's experimental or lightweight as well?
Yeah. I mean, I like to say to come up with sort of the smaller experiments that give you clues as to whether you should make them or you should invest more deeply. Like, and I think the reasons to invest more deeply can go beyond just, "Oh, it makes us more money." Because sometimes, because I mean, that's a really good reason. But another good reason might just be, "Oh, because this makes our content more sustainable for us." Like,
Mhm.
this gives us more time to or, another channel to produce content for that we can repurpose from, and it kind of adds to our overall idea bank. Like, that makes it sustainable, right? 'Cause it helps sustain ideas. Maybe it's not too expensive to produce. I don't know. Maybe it gives the sales team more conversational pieces, like those things still matter. So I guess I would say think about the things that make it more sustainable for your business. Whether that means it makes you a ton of money, brings in a ton new leads, or it helps feed the other parts of the business. Like maybe it even helps customer support because maybe you're sort of answering questions at scale, and then figuring out if there's a way you can measure that. Like maybe it can be something as simple as like looking at contacts reduced to the customer support team. Like or looking at like, hey, since we started this podcast and covered this topic, less fewer people ask us about this thing, and then, like, because that'll still show, like, okay, the team saved time talking about this.
Would you then try to align again content as a service that has like a client and a job? Would you then align that job with like business outcomes? Because when I hear this, that's a business outcome, right? Like a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation about how marketing can support the entire customer journey, even post sales. And we had this conversation, and we're gonna get into it, I promise, about AI and LLMs, of course. How we noticed at Dream Data that when using our product again, I guess I'm joining you in the self promotion when with using Dream Data, our own product, and sort of analyzing the deals that moved further and further down the funnel down to closed one, we saw that LLMs were actually surfacing a lot of our documentation. So we were talking about like, wow, should marketing also like own documentation or like some parts of it or whatever. So back to the example that you just gave, what I hear is like, okay, let's say that right now customer support or customer success are really fighting for their lives on whatever onboarding. Could that be a way of being like, okay, this is the business problem? How can different departments like help? Marketing can be like, okay, that's the job. Then what is the content to like help out that job? Is that a way to like practically think about it in our teams?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great way to think about it. I like to think of that kind of jobs to be done lens of content. But I also want to ask you if it's okay.
Oh,
How do
please.
how do you think about this podcast? Like how do you track success? What are the KPIs that you look for?
So, first and foremost, I have stepped in the past couple of weeks as a temporary host because our regular hosts have been unavailable.
Mhm.
So, that's one. But the way that we look at it, so this was started before my time at Dream Data. And again, it was actually started as a guess and test experiment,
Mm,
um, where they were like, let's just try it. We already have the microphones. Again, we're not losing anything by just trying it out. And the way that we or like the way that they assessed at the beginning was just looking at those very early, like, is anyone listening to this? Like, let's start there. Like, is anyone listening to this? And it's part of a bigger, for a lack of a better word, strategy that we have of employee-led content.
mhm,
And then we noticed that, yes, some people, were listening, but what was actually working the best was that our guests would share that they were going to participate in this podcast. And that sort of got eyes on Dream Data even more. And Stefan and Laura, they are our hosts. And then we saw that their content was getting pushed out to other audiences. And that's actually how the success of this podcast was measured. Now it's your typical downloads. We look at like the follower count of the guests that agreed to be part of the podcast, if that's growing, and it's all very, I guess, what they call vanity metrics and top of the funnel. But we're also okay with that. I think sometimes people think that because we're an attribution company, it's like everything must be measured, everything must be like attributed. And we do believe that in many ways, but we also understand that there's content that serves different purposes. And this podcast has been one of them. Later on, we actually started getting some feedback from customers that this podcast has helped them a lot in their own marketing, and started noticing that customers became like, I guess, loyal audiences to this
mhm.
podcast. And that to us was like a big, it's not a metric that we follow in the sense that like I won't be able to tell you what percentage of customers are active listeners, but it was enough feedback from customers that we were like, okay, we need to keep this on. Like if our customers that are B2B marketers are using this to help them figure out how to do their jobs, then like that's good enough feedback for us. And speaking of like scalability, I remember this was a while back where because it was such a big success at the beginning, we just wanted to do more and more and more. And it just really became unsustainable. Like we just didn't have the time for all the bookings and all the recordings and then the repurposing them and then putting them. It was just a lot. And we decided to sort of bring it down a bit to once a week. And that was a really good decision because there was this noise. So we could have more time to promote the podcasts. And because we weren't as busy, it also sort of raised the bar of quality as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super fast. I mean, all of this is truly really fascinating to me because Dream Data is an attribution company. And I think what's really interesting to me is that I feel like look, this is outside looking in. You could say or maybe you just think it in your head. But you could say I'm totally wrong, but the sense that I get outside looking in is that your team inherently understands like personal brand driven content, where it's like measurement attribution is not going to be perfect, but I get the sense that it's okay with your team. That
Oh,
it's like there's going to be
100%.
stuff we just don't know, or like, or at least maybe it's more like directionally you can tell something's working,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. I think also, again, because we are the attribution guy, sometimes people are shocked when we say these things or don't believe us. But like, we are, and like we do believe that if you can track it, you should. 100%. We
Yeah, if you
UTM.
can. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We UTM everything. Like
Yeah.
everything. But I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest, or like the not the biggest, but the first very viral moment that Dream Data had was Laura Dem, director of sales over in the US team. Her and Stefan, our CMO, Stefan Hillebrand, they were going to New York. I can't remember for what event, but they were going to New York. And then she just had this silly idea of buying a billboard in Times Square for like a couple seconds. I can't remember how much it cost, but it wasn't that much. And then she talked to the designer and she was like, can you just, it was literally just like the Dream Data blue, like our color, and then our font, which is very recognizable to us, obviously. And then it said something along the lines of like, our CMO wanted to use this budget for paid ads or something. And then she bought it, and then they went to Times Square, and she's making a video, and Stefan thinks that the video is gonna be like, I don't know, like we're in New York, whatever, for LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden on the phone, like on Laura's phone, he sees behind him, yeah, the billboard. And he turns around and then he looks back and he's like, Laura, what the F? How are we going to attribute this? And then it just cuts, and that went extremely viral. And if you were to ask anyone in this team, like it went viral in the sense that it was being used in presentations by like, quote unquote influencers on LinkedIn. The actual video itself went viral. It was being keynote speakers were referencing it as a good example of like how to do content, da da da. And if you ask anyone in this team, like, can you attribute anything to that? No, no, we can't. But it was great.
Right. Right, but you were able to, but you knew that it worked well.
Exactly.
You knew that keynote speakers were using it. You knew that people were talking about it at conferences or in podcasts. They're sharing it on LinkedIn. So, like, you know that those things matter. Like, it might not mean, and now we made $5,000. Like,
Yeah, no,
because that's not how
exactly.
that works.
Exactly. And I think what helps a lot at Dream Data is the fact that this is something that leadership, like senior leadership and C suite, understand. They
Yeah.
understand that once in a while, we're not going to, like, if I went to my CEO today and I was like, I want to use $10,000 for this silly idea. Yeah. I think he would be like, what are you expecting out of those $10,000? But I can't remember what the figure was for a couple of seconds ad on Times Square. Laura
Can,
shared it
can
once.
you can you tell us, is it over or under $100,000?
It's way under 100.
Oh
It's a
wow.
way under. Like I think she shared it once. I think it was $500. I can't remember. I'm sure if you ask Laura, find Laura or Dem on LinkedIn
Yeah,
and she'll tell
yeah.
you, but it wasn't
Tell
that much.
us.
It like
Oh,
it
and the other thing, though, that works so well is the fact that it was content for your audience,
yeah.
right? Like, if you did something similar for the Super Bowl, and you're like, "Did our Super Bowl ad air?" That probably wouldn't be it, because maybe your audience is watching the Super Bowl, but, like, by and large, the Super Bowl audience is not the Dream Data audience, right?
Exactly.
Like, the whole, like, square is not a rectangle, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like that. But at the same time, with this particular example, the content itself, like, what the F? Like, where's the attribution? And like posting it on LinkedIn, like that is where Dream Data's audience is. That is what Dream Data's audience thinks about and would find funny. Therefore, that's why that went so well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. But again, I think it was one of those examples of which is another thing that I like, and that just works because it fosters a culture of experimentation. Is that after that was so successful, it was kind of like, let's just try and do different things. And sometimes things don't work. Sometimes we think something is hilarious, and they just like no one cares.
Yeah. But then the other good thing about that is if they don't care, it just means they didn't see it.
Yeah.
You no one's like, "Wow, did you see how cringe that was?" They just didn't see it, and then you can just kind of, like, delete it later, like, "Oh, no, I
And
saw that, it's okay."
it's fine. Like, I think one of our co-founders, Lass, he said once, because I mean, wow, this podcast is now turning into like a promotional episode for Dream Data social selling. But
But no, I think people are curious about how Dream Data does it, so
um
I'm asking the real investigative question. No.
Ama- Amanda's like, listen, I've taken over this podcast and no
This
one's
is
gonna
my show
stop.
now.
No, but I don't know if you saw this trend on TikTok, but I think it started. I'm not sure, but I think it started with this older woman who has like a bed and breakfast somewhere in the UK or something like that. And it literally is just her with a little microphone in different like parts of her bed and breakfast. And then it says, when you ask your Gen Z daughter to help you make an ad or something like that, or to write a script or something like that. And it's just this older lady in different parts of the bed and breakfast just pointing at things and saying like it's giving diva or like whatever, like a lot of like Gen Z lingo, like millennial Gen Z lingo. And I just remember thinking like this would be such a funny video to do. And it took all of 15 minutes. Like I had this silly little idea. I wrote a script. I showed it to one of our content marketers who is actually a Gen Z person. She was like, "This is hilarious. Um we are doing this." Then she polished my script, and which I loved because she was kinda like, "You're the product marketer girl. I'm the Gen Zer, like, leave it to the pros." So she was just like, Give me your value props, like, I got this." I was like, "Okay." And then I was just, like, helping her. It took her, like, all in all, I think it took 15 minutes to not only make the script, record it, like, we just had our CMO just, like, point at things and say, like, "Slay," or "It's giving leader," and then pointing our G2 badge, like, stuff like this. And it took overall also to edit, everything was done in, like, in a day. I think the longest it took was maybe to be like, "Are we really doing this?" To, like, hype ourselves up to, like, do it. And I think I thought it was gonna perform well, and, Ali, our content marketer, she was like, "Yeah, I think this is gonna perform well." We posted it, went home, the next day, we had 3 million impressions.
Oh,
No, it was mental, like
wow.
and I remember after that, which goes back to, like, I think why it works at Dream Data, is that after that, the C-suite was like, "This is amazing," because do you know how much money you would have to spend to get 3 million impressions on LinkedIn? Like, that's crazy. So, they really wanted us to do and produce more, especially Ali, 'cause she has a talent for it.
Mhm.
And I remember her being a little scared because she's like, "Well, if that's the bar, like, if 3 million impressions is the bar, like, what am I gonna do?" And they were very intentional in telling her, like, "Listen, you're just gonna try things out, and sometimes things are gonna flop or they're not gonna be as funny, and that's okay, but at least you're gonna try." And I think that it has been also to encourage people to post because it is their personal LinkedIns, it's their personal brands as well. So it's been like an encouragement of like, "Listen, if you wanna do this because it can also help you grow as a professional and help you grow your network, that's great. We support you. We have tons of material to support you to do that. If you write a post that only gets a couple of likes, it's okay. Like Rome wasn't built in one day, and no one and if you wrote one that was really successful and then nothing is successful for the next 6 months, that's also okay." Like, I think it's very much that vibe of like, you can fail and it's gonna be fine. We're gonna try again
Yeah,
the next day. And I think
yeah.
that works for us.
And here's the thing too, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head when you said, like, 3 million impressions. How much would that cost if you paid for that? And that's where it pays to say organic content is more sustainable for your business because you're not paying out of pocket for 3 million impressions. Granted, you can't guarantee that through organic content, but if you empower a team that is able to make their own decisions, obviously within certain guidelines, like you work as a team, right? If you empower your team to kind of push the envelope, create content that they like, that they are proud of, that they have fun with even. Fun. that, like over time you can get some of these hits. Maybe it's not going to be 3 million. Maybe one day it's going to be 10,000. Then it's going to be 50,000. Then it's 100,000, 10,000. Like these things just compound over time, right? Because
Exactly.
other thing too is like you ask someone like, would you rather get one post in a 6-month period that gets 1 million impressions, or would you rather have 10 posts in a 6-month period that each get 100,000 impressions,
Mm.
right? That's fewer, but, like, I would take the latter,
Yeah, of course.
because it's like those things build upon each other over time. Those are the things that when you repeat them in some kind of way, right, that's what makes your audience remember you, and they go, "Oh, Dream Data. Oh, they've had a couple really good posts this quarter," or, like, "I feel like I've seen them a bunch of times." Like, that's ultimately how people think, not,
Yeah.
"Wow, they spent all this money on ads. I should keep looking at their ads. Wow, maybe I should buy the thing from them." Right? That's not how I'm not saying that ads don't work. What I'm saying is, like, when you are trying to win hearts and minds, that's not the key to doing it, right? And everyone knows that. Like, ads aren't the key to winning hearts.
No.
Yeah. I
Hearts
think
and
it's fair.
minds.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying that as like, "Oh, ads are bad." No, it's not even that perspective. It's just like, I think any, like, paid ad person would probably agree, like, "Yeah, yeah, I just bring home the sale," which is a valiant effort too.
Yeah, and I think other brands or companies that, as I've said now, like at Dream Data, we're like big champions of social selling and like employee-led content. And we've also started to notice that it's become like we've seen other B2B companies sort of follow suit and do that as well because it works, right? And just in terms of paid ads, like personally, a company like Cognizant comes to mind. Like I follow a lot of their employees, including their CMO, Alice DeCursey. So when their paid ads pop up, I actually stop to see them, right? Because it's like, oh, that's Cognizant. But I know Cognizant through Alice. So I think it's again like these different channels or whatever, like they just inform and support each other. I think they all have their own space and time, but you are completely right. Like hearts and minds are not won through paid ads.
They're just not.
But actually, someone just it's not a question, but it's a nice little shout out. You are the perfect example of personal brand working for SparkToro. So,
Oh.
what works over at SparkToro?
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. What works at SparkToro? Okay, so I think that's kind of interesting about SparkToro is, look, we have an unfair advantage with this is Rand Fishkin's company, right? Like anyone in digital marketing knows who Rand Fishkin is. And so on one hand, we had that unfair advantage, right? But on the other hand, that means that one would think that I would come into this company like, okay, let's do all this content under Rand's name. And sometimes we do, but we also believe like, well, that's not sustainable. Like everything can't come from Rand. We can't have all the emails go from Rand Fishkin. Like that's just not like good for us. Like we want people to know SparkToro. So I do think about our content, like our meaning like mine, Rand's, and SparkToro's in different ways. Right. So like I kind of just use our roles accordingly. So things that come from SparkToro are like, well, what does the company think about this thing? So obviously it's going to be like product features, news and announcements. Yeah, yeah. That's pretty straightforward. But then also like what Rand and I each say about the news and announcements and new features, then it's like our perspective on it. Rand might say something more overarching and more visionary driven, like this is what it means for the marketing industry. And then I would approach it more as a marketing tactician. Like, here's what this new feature means for your workflow today. Right. And so those are three different perspectives. And that's also how that informs the rest of our content. Like a lot of Rand's content in general is visionary driven. This is the research I did on how this is how traffic flows around the web from Google. This is the research I did. Here's what I think this means. That's Rand, right?
Yeah.
SparkToro would say, "Hey, this is how traffic flows around the web. Here's what we believe this means for audience research. Here's why we think you need audience research. If traffic is flowing in this way that's harder to attribute, what you need to do is know your audience. Don't just know the Google, like, whatever. That's gonna keep changing. Your audience is the constant. You have to understand them, you have to know where they are, you have to know how to speak their language, get on their level, and market to them effectively, right? That's a Sparktoro message. And then for me, Amanda, the message is, what does all this research mean for your team? What does it mean for all the different roles? What does it mean for content marketing? What does it mean for the paid ad side? Like, how does this work across your team? What do you think about it? Yeah, this is really freaking confusing. How do I know how to make an impact today? Like, how do I know how to figure out the rest of my content calendar? Like, I don't know how to do that. Help
Yeah.
me. So I approach it as like, I'm your marketing bestie. We got this.
How did was that like an organic um decision? Can decisions be organic? Maybe. Was that an organic
No, it
choice?
was.
Okay,
It was. Yeah, because it well, yeah, like, meaning, like, did it kinda just, like, come naturally in a way?
exactly. Or
It
were you like,
did.
or were you like, I'm not gonna compete with this guy. So let me
Yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, right? Yes, but no, right? So the no is that I didn't have that explicit thought, but there's a version of that that I had, right? There was like, "Well, I'm not gonna try to replace Rand. He's not gonna be better, like, he's not gonna try to outdo me, like, that's not how any of this works, like, I am going to just, like, empower myself as an individual who gets to work with Rand. This is how we're better together. This is how, like, all these pieces work really well together. This is why Rand is awesome. This is why Sparktoro is awesome." So, like, it kinda just I guess I will just say, like, yes, it was organic because that was just, like, how it worked. Like,
and
it was just
probably also how
the
you thought
natural
about it,
flow.
right?
Yeah, because of course, like, as a marketer, I'm thinking, "Great, how can we get the most out of this incredible research that Rand has
Mhm.
done?" Like, yeah, it's done, it's out there, great, but, like, now what for
Yeah.
marketers? What does it mean today? How does it change what you do on LinkedIn? Does it change what you do on LinkedIn? Those are the questions that I'm
Yeah.
pursuing next. Yeah.
What were you so over at Dream Data, how the whole social selling started over here was
Mhm.
and I hope I'm not telling the story wrong because it was before my time, but I'm pretty sure it was Laura made a post. She did not think it was a controversial post. It was a post about attribution, mind you. No one was really posting on LinkedIn, no one from Dream Data at the time. But she just had an inkling that there was something here. So she just made a post, very non-controversial, and for whatever the stars aligned that day, and the right people and mind you, this was not her first post on LinkedIn. She had been trying a couple stuff, but that day the stars aligned and different profiles with bigger followings than hers started posting, and all of a sudden this like debate explodes in her comments. And the way that she tells the story is that she starts freaking out. She's like, "Oh, no, 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 no. What did I do? What did I do?" And she goes over to Stefan, I think the story goes, and tells or like shows him. And Stefan is all like, "It's fine. Like, let's go grab lunch. Like, whatever." They go grab lunch, come back. It's like people are writing even more and more, but it was like just people were having a discussion on LinkedIn comments as people do. And all of a sudden, Stefan starts seeing in the coming days that this has done a lot for like likes, views, just very like early signals, just more eyes on Dream Data. And that's when they were like, maybe Laura has a point. Let's, test this out. And it ended up turning into, I think, a little competition that if they reached, I can't remember what the metric was, but if they reached X, whatever, they would take the team out for like a nice dinner, which ended up happening. But it was very much based on those like early signs of like maybe there is something here. How was it for you guys at Spark Toro? Like, what early signals did it tell you that it was actually working?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and this is good because I know we wanted to talk about, like, kind of these, like, early indicators and the lagging indicators. It's the real-time social activity. Those are the early indicators, right? Because those are the things that happen right away. So it'll be things like some of those likes and comments, but also because I also wanna try to come at this with a point of view for, like, potentially smaller brands who might not have a lot of, like, LinkedIn followers and stuff. It's also getting that kind of real-time feedback during a webinar or during some kind of live chat like this. because when you have attendees, and look, it doesn't have to be a ton. It doesn't you don't have to have thousands of people, but like, if you have dozens, hundreds, and you encourage real-time discussion in the chat, and this is something we do during our SparkToro office hours webinars. We encourage people to just talk in the chat. We're like, drop in your notes, your reactions. If you like something, just use the chat. Be with us here. That helps us a lot because as we're presenting, covering examples, talking about new ideas, then we can see that real-time feedback of like, wait, I don't know what you mean. I don't understand that. Like, can you explain that again? Can you give an example? Like that is really helpful. Like even hearing that because we're like, oh, it's not super clear what we're saying. Great. Let's give an example. Let's make this clearer. Or, we'll get people who are like, oh, I love this. Oh my gosh, thank you for finally saying it. Like those are the things that like those really matter a lot. And I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be a lot. You can if you get like 20 highly engaged people in the chat, that's amazing. And then just kind of use that feedback, like feed off of it and then really try to address all that real time or even just make notes later because then you'll have follow up like, "Oh, I said this one thing that people had a lot of questions about. I need to go back and spend more time refining that thought and providing clarity and get a good example for that." That helps a lot.
I guess it's also like just by the way, when these sort of moments that I've shared so far about dream data, we were also smaller. We're a smaller brand then. And I think the way, at least how I hear you say it, or what popped up into my head was like, well, if your audience is in the thousand or sorry, in the dozens,
Mhm.
like, but those dozens are engaging. Well, that's your number. Like that's the
Yeah.
number. Like if you have a dozen people and out of those, like, 10 are engaging with yourself. That's a pretty good ratio,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But, yeah, like you said, let's talk about some of these, like, leading and lagging, indicators. We actually came out with a benchmarks report, this year, and we analyzed thousands of B2B customer journeys, and we saw that on average, the B2B customer journey is 211 days, and with only
211 days
yeah.
to before purchase?
From first touch to close one, that's 211 days,
Huh.
and with only 62 of those days in the sales pipeline, which means that marketing is responsible for roughly, like, 70% of that journey,
Ah.
and so given that very long window of time, how should teams think about measuring the performance of their content, right? If content is going to deliver value in months, what should they look at
Yeah. Wow, that's a really I took notes on that because I was those are really fascinating numbers. Wow, 211 days.
on
That's n
average? Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
grown. Yeah.
yeah. How what is that in months? I don't know, like 7 months?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the time it takes to make a baby is no, like 7 months, roughly. Marketing was responsible for about 70% of that. Then you have several months that marketing has to think about the customer journey. That's a long time. I would say I guess I tend to think about things in stories. So I guess I would think about it like, what are the major story arcs that you need to cover throughout this journey? It really might just be like 1 to 2. Like maybe the one story is like, here's what our product is and here's how it works. Do you understand it? Great. And the second one is like the hero's journey. Like how do you, the customer, like how do you become the hero through using this product? How do you tell those two stories effectively over the course of like 7 months? Maybe that's just how I would think about it.
And how about on the other side of it? Like, what metrics do you think that B2B teams are looking at that maybe or maybe not that are not important, but maybe that they overvalue?
What do they overvalue? I have a feeling they overvalue the gated asset, like download our ebook today on this thing, because I think most teams today still tend to underdeliver on that.
Mhm.
It's like ultimate guide to this thing. I fall for it all the time. Like,
Me
look,
too.
I'm not
Annoying.
look, as your marketing bestie, I'm gonna tell you, I fall for a lot of this stuff, and I'm like, "I wanna know what's the ultimate guide." And the rage I feel every time, 9 times out of 10, like, there's nothing ultimate about this. This isn't even the average guide.
You're
This is
like,
just
"I'm doing this right now, actually."
yeah. It'll be like, "We give you a playbook for all the headlines, blah, 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 blah," and it's like a weird Mad Libs thing that is worse than what I would get from my first pass at ChatGPT, where I'm like,
No, but actually,
"Come
let's
on,
talk
man."
about that because I think a lot of no, truly, because I think a lot of gated content, especially when it comes to like mastering LLMs or mastering AI, I fall for all these ultimate guides. I read them and I'm just like, this cannot be a guide. Like this is how everyone is using ChatGPT. You
Yeah.
have not ultimate guided anything.
You've not, no. And so that brings me to the other thing is which is now something I think that is really undervalued is if you're gonna make the ultimate guide, make the ultimate guide, and that ultimate guide should be, "Here's everything you need to know about how to do this thing before you hire me." And me being Dream Data, the company,
Yeah.
whatever, it's like and I think more people should do this because not enough people do it. Because
I
I think
might
people are
steal that.
they're afraid of giving away their secret sauce. They're like, "No, but then they won't hire me." And I'm like, "No. What you need to do with your with a gated asset, like a really and I'm just saying gated asset as like even just a placeholder for extremely high quality piece of content that's supposed to get you good leads. It could be whatever form you want it to be. But like that is the thing that is supposed to bring in the best customers. And somebody who is, let's say you're B2B, like somebody whose own business is not bringing in much revenue, but they still need some tools, they still need some frameworks. They're not a good customer for you because they don't have the money. And that's okay. That doesn't make them bad. It just means they are not the right customer for you.
Yeah.
So what should you do as the content creator? Meet them where they are. Give them everything they need to know today so that they can go from like, I don't know, like 500,000 ARR to 3 million ARR so that they can then become your customer. Like do it. Fine, create this content that is extremely helpful to this person so that they don't have to buy your product because this person who is not making it their business not making a ton of money, they're not in a position to spend 5,000, $10,000. I don't know however much your service costs, like, they're not in a position to spend that, but it doesn't mean that they will never be in a position to spend that, so it's like, think about how can you enable them to get to the next step so that they can be in a position to buy from you, because I guarantee you a person who learns that much from your content, who is like, "Holy moly, this company helped save my business. Now, like, I get to hire employees and I'm doing great." Yeah, they're gonna buy your product when they're ready.
But that also means of thinking about content back to the conversation we were having about the customer journey. That's also thinking about content as like a very long game, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that shouldn't be you shouldn't just be making content that means that you're gonna have customers in 3 years. But
Yeah, 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 but, like,
right,
some of it should be, right?
yeah.
Like
I like
and
that perspective. Like, don't be
yeah,
scared if it
yeah,
doesn't turn into like influence pipeline by the end of
right.
quarter.
But the thing is too, when I'm saying create the definitive guide should only be one guide, right? Because it's definitive. So what I'm really saying is I'm not like don't you can't make one definitive guide per month because then they're not definitive. Like if it is definitive, you make one and then you're done for the next like 3 years because it was definitive. Come
And
on,
then
guys.
the rest of the time you could just spend in making content that is actually going to
Right.
bring revenue that year.
Right, so, spend, like 3, 4, 5 months on this definitive guide, work on that, but in the meantime, you spend a lot of your day to day doing, like, pushing out the top of funnel content, doing your Instagram reels, doing your daily LinkedIn posts, updating on the blog once a week, whatever is your however your content stack looks like, yeah, you keep doing that, but meantime, you work on the heavy hitting pieces, the things that move the needle in an impactful but long tail way, like once or twice a year.
So I want to keep talking to you for like another hour. So I
We'll
think
do
we're
a
just
part 2.
I swear I was about to say, like, I think we're gonna
Yeah,
have to bring you back, but I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that our listeners are gonna be very upset with me if I don't bring up AI. So here we go. As I was telling you earlier, I found out I could see that a lot of sort of that later stage, close one revenue pipeline stage, a lot of the a lot of the documentation that was being surfaced by LLMs were our help docs, which
Mhm.
was very interesting because I was like, okay, they really need to be optimized for LLM search. If that's where people are looking at our documentation. How do you think that teams need to like rethink, you know, how their content gets surfaced when people are replacing Google with ChatGPT?
Well, I mean, my response to that is also a lot of questions. It's, are people like, are people actually replacing Google with ChatGPT? If so, are they actually clicking on the things? If so, okay, then let's talk about how do you create content that gets here, right? So part of it is understand if there actually is an opportunity, right? Because like one thing we've seen through some research at SparkToro is that Google has actually grown last year. Like, when if you were to do an apples to apples comparison of search-like behavior in ChatGPT compared to search, right? Because people use ChatGPT for a number of reasons, and we know that it's only a small portion of it that correlates to search-like behavior. I believe SEMrush did a study on this, and I wanna say it's something like roughly 20%.
Hmm.
I can pull this up. Okay, so we know that 70%, this is through data from SEMrush last year. Roughly 70% of ChatGPT prompts are for non-search like functions, like creating images, summarizing text, writing code, cheating on your homework, right? That's most of it. So which means that roughly 30% of ChatGPT behavior is search like. So when you compare that to Google, and look, we actually know, I mean, I think Sam Altman himself said that like ChatGPT gets like a billion messages a day. Great, that's a great number to work off of. If we assume that roughly 30% of that is search-like intent, that means there are roughly 38 million searches, quote unquote searches per day on ChatGPT. When you compare that to Google, Google actually gets over 5 trillion searches per year, which means 14 billion searches per day. So we're still comparing, if we're thinking about user search, that is, we'll just round up 40 million searches per day on ChatGPT and 14 billion searches on Google. So that's where I will say I would push back against when people say, like, no, people are replacing Google with chat. I think some people are replacing some behavior with chat. However, they're also still going back to Google. Now, our friends over at Siege Media, they did a smaller study on, the impact of, like, homepage traffic from ChatGPT and found that the more that a brand appeared in ChatGPT results, like in LLM overviews,
Yeah.
the higher their homepage traffic was, which basically just meant that more people were seeing them mentioned in ChatGPT or maybe even like Claude or Gemini.
Yeah.
Over time, we're going back and going, "Oh, what was that brand again? Oh, yeah, I'm gonna go search for them."
Mm.
So it's maybe I would just say I feel like I covered a lot in just that small time frame, like a lot of numbers. So maybe I'll just kind of wrap up with like maybe zoom out on that. It's not so much how do I get in the LLMs? It's how do I create content, do my marketing in a way that is more impactful to the digital ecosystem, which is inclusive of getting mentioned in the LLMs? And which I'll say is some of the principles are pretty similar to SEO. It's like create content that's helpful and meaningful, it's valuable, that people actually want to share and consume, that makes people actually want to be on your page because it's a definitive guide. And they're like, "Oh, that's really helpful." People who share that definitive guide because they're like, "Guys, this one actually is a definitive guide." That's what's going to get mentioned in the LLMs, not the shitty monthly definitive guides that are not definitive. So that's my advice on that. I feel like we have to wrap up soon.
We
Sorry.
do have to wrap up soon. I just wanted
Yeah.
to say, like, that's a really good perspective. And I think it kind of ties it back to what you said at the beginning when you were talking about Spark Toro, like figuring out where your audience is. And even though we are seeing like some change of behavior, like maybe is your audience changing behavior? Like maybe stop and look before everything gets LLM optimized. Like, is this true to how your buyers are behaving? Which is always a good thing to keep in mind, whether you're doing paid ads or content. Like, how is your audience behaving?
Yeah.
But I would like to finish off, I guess, with one question because we have 1 minute left. Well, no, two questions. The first one is going to be, what's one belief about content performance or just content in general that you wish every B2B marketer would unlearn today?
That dark social is real, and if you're counting on getting, like, actual data or real data and, like, your Google Analytics on whether the traffic is actually coming from Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, you're almost certainly wrong, and you're undercounting the impact. Because 'Cause we've also done this study at SparkToro where we found, like, if you get any traffic from, like, Slack or TikTok, 100% of the time, that's gonna be marked as direct traffic, which means you think people are going to like, "Oh, sparktoro.com." No, that's not true. So, the thing I think people need to unlearn is social referral traffic. It's like, no, a lot of it's not true. Sorry.
Just to end on a negative note. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. No,
But it's
good.
anyway, yeah, kind of.
Tell them. Tell them, Amanda. And then final question is, where can listeners follow your work and learn more about SparkToro?
Yeah, so please check out sparktoro.com. We have always free accounts so that you can learn more about your audience. And we've also just launched this new take action feature where it does work with ChatGPT, where we can give you immediate marketing plans based on your audience. Like you can actually just search your audience, type in your website like one or two prompts, and then we will give you advice on specific marketing efforts. You can choose advice for like if you need new content positioning, if you need ideas for provocative content, headline ideas, all of this in just like, I don't know, 2 minutes, like under 2 minutes, I'll say. So check it out. If you have a free account, you can run about 3 take action queries. And then after that, if you get a paid account, you can get more. So do that.
And what about you, Amanda?
Oh, and
Where can
me,
we follow you?
follow me on LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn a lot. Amanda Nat, or connect with me there. Find me on LinkedIn, friends, because that's where marketing besties hang out.
And that's a great way to wrap up. Thank you, everyone that joined us for today's session. Thank you so much, Amanda, for coming here and sharing all the content knowledge that you have. This is 100% not the last time that we're going to have you. I
Oh,
could
gotta
talk to
come
you
back.
for another hour. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Again, thank you for tuning in to Attributed, a podcast by Dream Data. And you can find this episode and others wherever you get your podcasts. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.